Well, greetings all. Clearly, Ashley Farmer is the one that we all want to introduce. Now, listen, I had to leverage my Morehouse College degree to introduce a Spelman sister. Ashley Farmer, of course, is a dynamic historian at the University of Texas, Austin, the author of the author of Remaking Black Power, just a phenomenal book on how Black women transformed the Black Power era. Just used it, just had my graduate students read it this last semester. Currently working on a book on Queen Mother Audley Moore, the mother of Black nationalism, that we all must know about. I'm just excited. I just arrived in Florida. I'm here. I'm here to relieve some folk who have been going strong for 12, 14 hours now, 15 hours. So I'm excited to be. I'm excited to listen and learn from Ashley, from Dr. Farmer, and then I will be on in the next hour to build on what has already been going on and to share some thoughts and ideas. So Ashley, Dr. Farmer, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am coming to you from Austin, Texas, and I wanted to share a little bit about what's going on with our fight here in Texas and solidarity with what's happening with you all in Florida. As we know, Texas and Florida are two sides of the same coin, and we know that we are the vanguard of what is happening across the country. So I'm going to share a little bit about what's going on here, share a little bit about what we as faculty members and educators and students have been doing to try to fight back, and talk about opportunities of solidarity between folks here in Texas, folks here in Florida, and truthfully, anybody across the nation. So I think one of our biggest mistakes is kind of caricaturing Texas and Florida at these places that are not American. But the reality is that the whole entire project is anti-Black and anti-gay and anti-trans and all of the above. So what happens in one of these states is an affront to us all, and we must all be vigilant, even if it's not technically on your legislator's program right at this particular moment. So here's what I'm going to talk about in my brief time today. I'm going to try to go through this, share a little bit, and then hopefully have some time for questions and dialogue with Hassan or other folks on the stream. I'm going to tell you about the bills. You know, there are literally thousands, but I'm going to talk about three that are really affecting higher education here in Texas. A lot of what you're seeing happen at the higher education level has already happened at the K through 12 level here in Texas. I'm going to talk about how we're fighting back. I'm going to talk about some missteps we made, right? Some of the things that we should have been doing in the hopes that it helps folks who are getting ready to face this, but might be a little bit earlier in the pipeline, to help you all kind of get ready. And then I'll talk a little bit about opportunities for solidarity between folks here in Texas and everywhere else. So today I want to focus on three bills that are a particular note for higher education here in Texas. The first is what we call SB 16 or Senate Bill 16. Started in our Senate, which is run by our Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. If you know anything about Texas politics, he has it out for those of us who study anything slightly related to anybody who is Black, brown, non-white, non-straight, etc. Right? And the gist of this particular bill is that it restricts academic freedom and critical thinking inside and outside the classroom. So we should also focus on, even if they are talking about what we are teaching, they're also trying to just talk about what happens on campus life related to race, sex, ethnicity, or social, political, or religious belief, right? So this bill went from the Senate to our House. The House is controlled by our governor, which many of you know, Governor Greg Abbott. And it was blocked by the House, but that does not mean that the kind of impetus of this particular bill is not going to come to pass. We are currently in the throes right now. Actually, they're debating some of these bills at the House to kind of tack on one thing or the other. And so even though this particular bill died, we see how insidious this effort is, because lawmakers may try to add it onto another bill that is still on the floor. Our second bill that we have that is very detrimental and is very similar to what's happening here in Texas, or sorry, there in Florida, is Senate Bill 17. So Senate Bill 17 bans DEI offices, programs, practices, with a few exceptions, right? The original bill, as it came down the pipe at the end of March, had a board for reporting DEI work. It was very much a kind of McCarthyite understanding of, I saw this person doing DEI. And it had very strict penalties for what happened if anybody was engaging in quote unquote DEI. And we all know that they don't really know what DEI is. That included a 5-year hiring ban on state employees if they were reported to this board. And on top of that, a penalty of up to $1 million to a particular school. Now, our House is certainly, majority Republican. We have a super Republican majority here in the Congress of the state of Texas. However, there are some more, I guess you would say, moderate Republicans and Democrats in the House. So this bill got stripped down slightly. Some of the most harmful aspects, including that board, was taken out. However, the ban on DEI officers, the ban on DEI offices, the ban on student programs still stands. They've made an exception for what they call, I guess, federal and private grant funding, but you can imagine how onerous this is. But most importantly, such bills send a message that Black and brown people are not welcome on our campus, right? And that we should be cognizant of doing anything that might tiptoe on this bill. It's an effort, right, to help make us self-censor in the absence of a legal way to do so. And that bill is going to be voted on today or tomorrow, or debated, at least today or tomorrow in the House. So we'll have to see what passes and what versions of things come about, as the week unfolds. The next bill, and one that, is sweeping the nation in terms of principle and thought, is Senate Bill 18, which eliminates future granting of tenure at colleges and public universities, right? And we all know that even as the lawmakers try to make it seem as though when we are, tenured, that we're just sitting around with our elbow patches and doing nothing, the ability to not allow certain people into the professorate is part of the goal here. But also we see that this is part of a two-part strategy in which they're going to also start rolling back the ability of tenure to be something that you cannot be dismissed for doing your own work based on political beliefs or the kind of subject matter you study, right? So this is all an attempt, of course, to make a university that is not diverse, that is not attentive to the intellectual diversity and freedom that they so much claim that they want. And so they walked back the date in which this would go into effect, but this is also going to be voted on here, or debated and voted on, in the next couple of weeks. So, there are many other bills on the table, but I wanted to focus on these three because I think they are kind of a harbinger or a bellwether of what we've already seen in Florida in terms of the DEI bill, and what we're likely to see in other places, whether that be North Carolina, whether that be Ohio. There is and a concerted effort to gut higher education, particularly public higher education, right? That serves constituents and that taxpayers pay for. And honestly, at least in the state of Texas, are among the most diverse universities and colleges in the country. Okay, so we knew that this stuff was coming. This, anybody that's paying attention knew that this was coming down the pipe. So I'd like to take a little bit of time to share what we have done here in Texas to try to fight back, and in the hopes that it maybe be useful information for other folks that are gearing up for their own kind of fight. So we knew about 1.5 years. I should emphasize that the Texas legislature only meets every 2 years, but we knew our lieutenant governor tweets regularly and attacks against us. So we knew that this was coming down the pipe. So what are the things that we did to start to get ready before the legislative session even opened, before the bills were even filed, right? We started working with advocacy groups like the NAACP, LDF. I cannot say enough good things about them. They've been meeting with us for more than 1 year. They've been on the ground here since our legislative session opened. They've been prepping and helping us navigate the complicated kind of procedural work that has to take place in order for our rejections of these bills to be on the record, right? So we began working with them and thinking through a strategy for how to change popular opinion about these laws before they even got filed. Second, we started meeting with concerned faculty offline. And the offline part is important, right? For those of us who work at state universities, we are all very clear about the surveillance mechanisms that are in place. Texas here is a sunshine state, which means that, anything that you put on the record in terms of your public emails or your university email, and to some extent, even your private email, is subject for subpoena and also for FOIA, or Freedom of Information Act request, right? So we started putting mechanisms in place to communicate with one another outside of our public university, roles and emails. And this is important just because you want to make sure that you are operating as a private citizen and that you're not using the public university's Zoom, the public university's email, et cetera, to organize if you're going to do this work. It just sets you up, right? We started writing op-eds. If there's one thing professors can do, we can write an opinion, right? Because a big part of this is a battle, right, over popular opinion about what DEI means, what's really happening on our college campuses, what is actually being taught in college classrooms. And so we started working with our local newspapers to write op-eds to try to engage in the public debate. A big thing that the right has done, and I hate to admit it, but it's done very well, right, is messaging, right? So we started to get into the fray of messaging as well. We started to meet with like-minded legislators, right? Even if we are in legislative and governing situations that are hostile to academic freedom and to inclusivity, it doesn't mean that we have no allies in the government. So we really started to work on shoring up those folks and finding other folks that would go to bat and batting down these bills. And then establishing an AAUP chapter, an American Association of University Professors chapter. This is a central clearinghouse for professors to learn accurate information, and also is helping lead the fight. Their folks are down at the House today, as a matter of fact, working in this way. So that all happened before we even filed the bills. We knew the bills were coming, but it wasn't until March that we knew exactly what was going to be the language of the bills. And, that makes it somewhat difficult because you kind of feel like you're fighting a boogeyman to a certain extent until you know exactly what they're trying to pinpoint and how they're trying to come at you, right? So our legislative session opened this past March. And so that's when we geared up in talking about how harmful the actual pieces of legislation would be. When are they trying to roll back tenure? What are they trying to eliminate in terms of constituting DEI? The original bill about race and gender had that you couldn't teach anything except for slavery being an aberration in American history, right? So then we start to go to work on those individual kind of aspects of each bill. So what are we doing while the legislation is still in session? We're in session for another about a week and a half here. One is to continue building coalitions. That means that we needed more than just faculty, more than just the NAACP LDF, but also students, also business owners, also nonprofit folks, right? To make the broadest swath for a case about why these bills are detrimental, not only to our college campuses, but also to the communities that surround them, right? I work at the flagship public university, the University of Texas at Austin, but the University of Texas system serves everybody from the border all the way to North Texas, right? There will be disparate effects into how these bills affect our different campuses. And most importantly, they will harm different communities in different kinds of ways. We continue to write op-eds. Again, never cede the public floor and the public opinion floor, right? We have to continually assert that what they're trying to do is wrong. We have to say it publicly. We have to clarify what we're actually doing here. And we have to talk about and name what is actually going on when they're trying to make these bills about the racism, the sexism, the homophobia, the transphobia, right? We continue building faculty support. Our meetings got bigger, and we continue building with lawmakers, right? Even we tried to identify people that even if they were Republicans, did not necessarily how shall I say, will not necessarily vote along party lines or ideological lines for ideological lines state. And we also tried to pinpoint issues from their constituency that will be raised, right, by the people they represent in doing this. So that means that we have to get outside the Capitol here and talk to the folks who are representing folks in other places in Texas and talk about how the gutting of their public university transforms the ecosystem that is that particular city or state or town. We also engaged in direct action. We did teach-ins with students. A big part of this coalition building is getting students on board. It is our responsibility as educators to educate. We have to educate students to understand what is happening. I mean, we can all think back to when we were college students trying to be politically engaged in the midst of a world that feels like it's falling apart is difficult. So we've helped focus them on the electoral process, the legislative process, and why these bills were going to affect their particular campus. We were like, you guys are in charge here. You are the constituents. Here we've got 40,000 undergrads. They need to know what's going on and make a decision about what they want their campus to look like. We testified against the bills. And so some of this is to help share, for example, what actually we do. When I went to testify, as you see right here in this one picture, I talked about how, in fact, I do so much more work now that I am tenured. It's not the opposite. And we endured questioning from both Democrats and Republicans about why the bill was harmful. This is important for them to hear from the people themselves on the ground that are doing this work every day, but also to make sure that we enter this into the record. So on the other side of this, if there is need for litigation, all these things are clearly noted in the House record or the Senate record. And then we protested in front of, this is us in front of the Capitol, and we engaged in national days of action in solidarity with folks who are struggling with some of these very harmful policies, like folks in Florida, but also to say that, we're here, we are not going anywhere, and we understand what you're doing, and we're going to fight back. This was a moment where we could bring staff and teachers and students and other kinds of educators together. And then after this particular protest that you see here, we went into the Capitol and lobbied legislatures once again. And our legislative session ends next week. So we don't exactly know what's going to come down the pipe. We don't know what we're going to see Abbott sign into a law, how much this will look similar to things that are taking place in Florida. That's certainly possible. And what will be in and out by the end of the bill. But we're still there every day at the hearing, showing our support for opposing these bills and continuing to call and lobby legislators to make sure that they understand that this is not something we want. We continue to work with advocacy groups like the ACLU, the NAACP, the Teach for Freedom, to work on the legality of what's passed, right? And possibly engage in litigation on the other side if it turns out that some of these things are violations of constitutional rights or other rights, right? We'll continue to publish and write op-eds to educate people about what's going on. And we'll also, on our own campuses, continue to push for the most liberal interpretations of these laws, right? And this means, in particular, not waiting for folks up on high, a board of regents, et cetera, to talk about what these laws are going to do and what we can and cannot do on our campuses and teaching, but rather to say, to meet with deans, meet with provosts, meet with presidents, meet with legal, have our own legal representation to say, this is what we think this law means, and this is how we're going to interpret it once they come down. So let's talk about the lessons learned. We have certainly, made some missteps in our organizing that I think that we'll have to think about as we go into this next legislative session. I think we should all understand that this is an ongoing fight. We're playing the long game here, just as they were playing the long game. So we will be back in this position again. So we should talk about what we learned and what we can do differently next time. One of the things that we didn't do as well as we should have, and that I would encourage folks who are, gearing up for these fights to do, is build coalitions early. It is sometimes hard to organize people when you don't know exactly what you're organizing them against, if that makes sense. The bills had not come out. We weren't sure exactly what they were going to say. We weren't sure what was going to be in them, if and how they were going to be phrased. So it's hard to galvanize support, but we should have done more working with students ahead of time to help them understand the legislative process and what was happening. We should have worked with folks in STEM more. We're largely humanities folks that are organizing on this front, because let's be real, the STEM folks bring in the dollars, and dollars make people think about it. We should have been working more with local business owners earlier. This is something also that we did, but we need to do it sooner and faster so that people can understand that if they gut our universities, or that if we don't allow us to prepare students for being diverse and inclusive employees and hires, how that shapes the ecosystem of the world around them. Right? I'm getting alumni involved, right? I would often go to talks or in other places around the country. I would meet somebody that was from UT Austin. And I would say, do you know what's taking place at your school down here? And some did and some didn't. But a lot of these places have big alumni networks with people that have influence, with state legislators, with campus folks. And so we need to get alumni involved more. And most importantly, educate, educate, educate. I can't express to you how many people are shocked and appalled by what's happening, but learning about what's happening too late, right? Until it gets to the point where we don't have the level of pushback we need in order to make sure that these bills are not passed, and that the legislators understand that there's real consequences, right, for those being passed, and also be incentivized for other reasons, right? And then finally, let's talk a little bit about solidarity across states, right? As I mentioned before, things that are happening in Florida, things that are happening in Texas are a bellwether of what's going to happen across the nation. This is a concerted effort to roll back the gains, and really quite moderate gains, right, of Black and Brown people in higher education and in places of business across the country. So we need to be aware of the commonalities of the bills. We need to educate ourselves, right? It's really difficult sometimes not to kind of be in our bubble. I get that we're kind of inundated with information all of the time, but find a couple of news sources, a couple of reporters on Twitter or Facebook that you trust that really report and do this work on education. I mean, both K through 12th education and higher education, right? And make sure that we make sure that we are following along this stuff with regularity, right? Share and amplify op-eds and other public work by folks, right? There's folks on the ground that are telling you what is and isn't happening in their state and how it will affect them and their educational world and the students and the children that we're educating. You know, if you see these, share them so that other people can be educated, right? And we can start to think about it and help other people think about it less as an isolated thing. This is happening in Florida. This is happening in Texas, but more a concerted effort across the nation with coordinated attacks, because with coordinated attacks, we can also create coordinated resistance, right? Talk to your lawmakers about the effects of these bills, right? There are many different ways in which lawmakers are susceptible, right? So if the we need diversity and inclusion is not working for them, okay. You know, it worked in South Carolina when they explained how much tourism dollars would change if they started outlawing the study in education of slavery. So find what it is that makes your lawmakers motivated. That's a strategy, pure and simple. And talk to them about how these bills will be detrimental. Maybe it means that, you know, big companies and employers won't want to come and donate money to the university or recruit folks from the university. Maybe it means that it's going to change tourism dollars. Maybe it means that it's going to hurt the ability to get massive grants. Whatever it is that speaks to them, this is what we need to be focused on. Also, encourage national organizations and advocacy groups to denounce these bills in states, right? So if you're a part of a professional organization, if you're a teacher, K through 12 teacher, if you're a member of a sorority or fraternity, a member of some sort of civil society, if you're a professor and you're a member of a professional group, you know, the historians have the American Historical Association, the Organization of American Historians. We need these groups to come out against them because they are in effect lobbying groups, right? And they have influence in legislative power. And also, if possible, see if folks from these particular groups, whatever, you know, kind of organization or group that you're in, are willing to meet with lawmakers or even come testify when these bills are on the floor. After a while, all these lawmakers keep hearing the same folks come through. But when somebody else, particularly somebody who talks about the national impact comes in, it makes a difference. And then finally, like, you know, forge material and solidarity networks with folks on the ground. I put my information at the beginning. You know, all of our emails are public because we work at public universities, but find somebody on the ground, a point person on the ground that is doing the same kind of work that you're interested in doing. Share strategies, share tips for decompressing, because this is a full-time job on top of your regular full-time job to be working against these bills. It's mentally very taxing. And also for them to be a liaison to help coordinate and amplify your own work, right? So, you know, I want to end by just suggesting here that, you know, all is not lost, right? Those of us who are students of history know that there is a pendulum that swings one way and a pendulum that swings another, right? The key here is to play the long game and stay the course, just like they're playing the long game and staying the course. And together, organizing and moving with purpose, we can create the educational environments and really the world that we want to live in. Yes.
Can you hear me, Dr. Farmer?
I can hear you.
Hi, this is Dr. Terry Ann Scott. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Or I should say, thank you so much for the work that you are doing in the community. It was so important for us to have you here because while we are here in St. Petersburg, Florida, and shining a light on what's happening in Florida, you demonstrate to us the importance of acknowledging that this is not just a local issue. This is not just a statewide issue. And if we allow it to be and don't stop it, this could become a national issue.
Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, we appreciate y'all that are in Florida because I think you're seeing again the worst and the first of it, right? But it will be the least and the last of it. And so we need to make sure that as we support you, we also understand that we are all fighting one big fight here.
We are fighting one big fight, and we can win because if anything, history tells us that people have won before. It's a recurring theme, and that's what we've been talking about. One of the things we've been doing over the past, I've lost track now, 15 hours, 13 hours. I've lost track largely because I've slept 20 minutes, but it's good. It's for a good cause. If they could do what they could do, I can stay up, no big deal. But we know that we can win this battle because we've won it before. And it's things like this and the work that you're doing and these conversations that catalyze people. So if somebody says to you, they're watching this, because we have a number of people who are watching this feed, they're writing things in the feed. If they said, you know what, I am moved in this moment right now, today, to do something, what's something you suggest they do right now today?
I think they do two things. One, they start to gather, right? I cannot express to you how much, you know, we all talk about it. We all shake our heads as we look, scroll through the Twitter feed, but you've got to start to gather who your people are that you're going to organize with, right? There is one thing to be denouncing things online, is another thing to get up every day and meet and organize and move with purpose. So start to gather, right? Maybe a small group. If we started as a small group and got bigger, right? As more people caught on, it can be a couple of people, but start to gather, one. And then two, start to find the most reliable source of information about what's happening in whatever it is that you're concerned about, right? That education and gathering are steps that help us move with purpose.
Right. We say education to action in the Institute for Common Power. So it's that gathering. You said something very significant. Sometimes people discount the power of the individual, the power of one, the power of a small group. But when we look back at so many instances in history where one person created a movement, what do you say to the people who say, I don't know that I can do this. I am just one person. What can I do?
I would say two things. One is that that's a narrative they've told you to help you keep powerless, right? It is no coincidence, right, that everything you learn in history is Rosa sat down because she was tired. Martin had a speech. We make this kind of individualistic way of thinking about our heroes so that we don't understand that there's large amounts of people behind them doing this work. They're never alone. They're never doing it on their own. And you don't have to either, right? You do not have to reinvent the wheel. There are people everywhere doing the work. The key here is to find them, join them, and help them figure out how you can offer some sort of material aid. And material aid doesn't necessarily mean money, though it can. You know, organizing needs money, but also maybe it's your time, maybe it's your networks, maybe it's your connections, maybe it's making signs, maybe it's childcare so that people can go do the work that they're doing, right? But educate yourself and then join people that are already working. You are never alone in this fight. And one of the biggest disservices we do in the teaching of history is this kind of individualistic hero narrative where we pretend that one person was doing this all the time. That was never in fact the case, right?
Right. And everybody has a position. I love how you're phrasing that. You know, I've had the honor through my work here to be able to work very closely with Dr. Bernard Lafayette, with Bob Zellner, and people ask them regularly when we're meeting with them, well, what about somebody who didn't feel like, for instance, they could take a punch and not do anything back? What about this person? And they said everybody had a purpose. If they couldn't do that, maybe they made copies. Maybe they drove people around. And so I love what you're saying about kind of finding your own purpose, finding the thing that you can do and putting that into action because everything matters.
Yes. And when you find the thing that you do, it also helps sustain you, right? Like, again, I say we're in it for the long fight. So, you know, you may not be able to do all of the things on an ongoing basis, but if you find something that brings you fulfillment and you feel brings you purpose, but also contributes to things, then you can do that as an ongoing, you know, contribution versus coming in and out, right? But think of it as a slice of a pie. Everybody's got their slice of what they can do, but together we can make it happen.
That's beautiful. So I have one more thing that I want to ask you. We have received a lot of backlash. It doesn't matter. It's not going to stop us. So just to be clear, we have received a lot of nasty information online. I'm going to share with people who are out there. We actually, just to be safe, hired security for this event because we had a lot of people saying, stay away, don't come here. And I'm saying it's so much nicer than they said it. We had people writing racial slurs to us. And so we had to be, concerned. They were not going to shut us down. That's not going to happen. We're not going to back down because, again, if people could do what they did before us, we can do anything. But we took precautions, but we stay the course. So let me ask you something. Have you experienced any kind of backlash? And if so, what do you guys do about it?
Yeah, and I don't want to take away from this point that is very scary and very real, right? I mean, none of us want that part of doing this work. We have had professors whose students have threatened them. We have had I always get hate mail. So it's nothing.
It's just
I have that. It's another day. But we get hate mail with threats that sometimes we turn over, and will they be investigated or not? And sometimes we do have to kind of lay low for a minute, right? Yeah. And it doesn't mean that we're not committed to working in other ways, but if we find ourselves to be, particularly after our rally, for example, that we held, the subject of blogs and other things where we know that they invite people to incite harm, violence, hatred towards us, then sometimes we collectively say, okay, I'm going to lay low for a minute and let some of this blow over before we go back. I'll contribute, but I'm not going to be the public face of this particular interview, right? Or the public face of that. So part of having a holistic, and that's why I keep saying gather kind of community, is to say that when somebody is the target of something and may need to, take a moment and step back either for their own mental health or for their safety, or just because it's best for the group, if we have other people, then that's not a problem, right? People can tap in and tap out as they need to make sure that they're safe.
So, and I'm asking this because I know people are thinking this who are watching. I know people have asked us this. If you have that, why not just quit?
Well, I mean, what world do you want to live in? Right? What world do you want to live in? Nothing comes, that kind of, I hate to say this, I'm again, huge King fan, but this idea that the arc of history, has always been towards justice is not entirely accurate, right? The arc of history moves towards justice because of collective work of people together. Right? Wow. It is a give and take. It is not a straight line. It is not a beautiful rainbow. It's, a little bit more of a cha-cha. You move backwards, you move forward, but you're moving in the right direction. So you can't wake up and want a world that you're not invested in trying to see, right? And it doesn't come magically. We're not on some triumphant march towards an American democracy that is just simply not true. We've got to make it. So you've got to do your part in making it.
I am so happy that you accepted our invitation for you to come and speak to us. Thank you so much. Thank you for the words of encouragement. Thank you for your persistence. Thank you for your vision of living in and creating the kind of world you want to live in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Keep up the good fight.
You too. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.